We are clearly in a place where no man has gone before. So,
of course.
All right. So now I'm seeing, and I have to be sure that we are on the, I think we're good. We're on YouTube right now. Wow. So now let me send the welcome to those watching. For those that are watching, we are on a new platform. It's only taken us, what, Joseph, an hour and a half to figure this out, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, we made it. So, and I tried my best to invite the normal WeatherBrains group via our group email, and apparently that doesn't work for some reason. So now let me go in here and type in everybody's email address. For those that are just joining us, this is WeatherBrains, the pre-show, that magical time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. So I always have to say that. When we're early this week, we're right day of the week, we're just doing it early. So now let me invite everybody the old-fashioned way. I thought I was going to be cute and just invite everybody with one group email, but apparently that doesn't work. All right. We got to get Kevin in here and Aubrey in here. And we are now going to send the invitation. And what I'm going to try and do is watch the YouTube video feedback here so I can kind of see what's happening. And I also need to put this over on our live.bigbrains media page. Okay. You know, we are in a new world. And for those that don't know, our old platform went away, Google Hangouts. And so we are using a new video platform, which we are learning on the fly this evening. And I see Aubrey and Kim. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice. Okay. We're streaming live. We are on the air everywhere. In fact, what I'm going to do, the one thing I do need to see before we start, the one thing I don't know is what exactly controls the video that's seen on the screen here. So let's see if I can find me here. There's my account, and we are live. So let's see. And a little latency here. So we have a Zoom logo in the lower right. All right, somebody talk, and let's see. Let's see if it takes control.
Hey there, I'm Troy.
Nate's here.
John? Yeah.
So it looks
John,
like
can
on.
you hear us? John, can you hear us?
John, give us a thumbs up if you can hear us. John can hear us. The only bug we found so far is the fact that John we can't hear him.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
Gosh, it's always something.
Do we need to invite anybody else here that
I just
is not
sent
with us?
I just sent Violetta the link. So hopefully
Okay. Yeah. You guys have the link, so anybody else that needs to be on here. Yeah, so it looks like on YouTube, it's just full screen. Let me switch to the gallery view and see if by chance that affects what goes out to the world. I'm trying to see what people watching are seeing on YouTube, because a lot of what we're seeing here. Yeah, okay, yeah. When I do that, they see everybody.
Okay.
So now we are all in boxes, and if I go back to the speaker view, then you will just see whoever's speaking. And hello to everybody watching on YouTube.
Sorry about that.
I'm shocked we have so many people watching. I've not even tweeted this out to the world here. let me check one more thing here.
Try face bag.
Face bag.
Now we can't stream on the WeatherBrains Facebook page as an option, but Kevin's head would blow. He would be in orbit if we did that. So we're not going to do that. So it looks as though the options I have, it's simply the Brady Bunch or Hollywood Squares view and the full screen view, from what I can tell.
I'll take Shadow Stevens for the block.
And I do think we can go a little higher on the quality, but I opted not to do that just on this first night here. There is an HD option, but we're not there tonight just because we didn't want anything else to go horribly wrong here. So, okay, now I have put it over on live.bigbrainsmedia.com, so the video is there, so our TV station can hit this. And again, if you're watching on television, welcome. It's WeatherBrains. We are actually recording this a little earlier than usual on Monday night, but you should be starting at about this time on the TV side. And we're missing Bill Murray. Bill. And I sent this thing out to email at
WeatherBrains?
Usual. Yeah. And for some reason, nobody got that. Nobody joined after I sent that one. I was thinking, let's just do it all together.
I'm going to forward mine to Bill.
We'll just keep sending him emails till he gets that. And once we get Bill on here, we can get started. Zoom. And I do believe we can actually stick our logo down there in that lower right at some point. We'll figure that out next week. We are just amazed that we have figured this whole thing out. We are just amazed that we have figured this whole thing out.
I don't like that.
Wait, John, we hear you.
Hey, John.
John, we hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did you do?
I've been flipping every knob I could find.
There's a show title. Yeah.
So many show titles, so little time.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill.
Hello.
Okay.
And Violetta, can you hear us? Oh, so Violetta cannot hear us. One more thing to try out here.
I can't see her either. I guess she's
She
over the
is
right. Okay.
not muted. There's an option where you can, mute people as they come on. I did not check that, so everybody that comes on should be on the air. So it's a matter of her settings, video on the audio side.
It's going to be bad that I can't get the email. That's not good. It's not in my junk.
Another
Bill,
show
did you
title?
get my email? I forwarded it to you.
I did get yours.
Okay, you got mine. Okay.
Yeah, that is a show title, by the way. It's not in my junk. The problem is we can't use the pre-show show titles because most people listen and they don't hear this. And the ones that listen want to see where in the show title is inserted and where it comes from and what it means.
I like that the chat appears over the screen if you don't have it. If you don't have the chat open, that's nice. Sometimes I'll miss something important if I'm not paying attention to the chat window.
All right. So,
But what about testing guests in the future, James? Well, I guess I can do it from the account that it invited me to set up.
yeah, we'll have to think about that. I don't.
Yep. Heard you just then, Violetta.
Woohoo!
Yay!
Yeah.
Yay.
We solved the new math.
You can hear me
we've
okay?
got-
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Woohoo!
We have 9 people on the show. We can hear all of them, and they can hear us, which is
What a time to be alive.
What's the theoretical
life-
max, James, on this thing?
100.
Ooh.
we get the whole weather enterprise on here. Before this thing blows up, let's get this thing started here. So
Bye-bye, Google.
Yeah,
Nora.
you're done with the Google. First show ever on this new platform. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, this is WeatherBrains. This is the weekly show all about weather. This is episode number 706.
Yeah, very good. James.
Number 706. This is for the 29th of July. And let's just say up front, and we know that most of you listen and have absolutely no interest in the video side, but many people do watch, about 1 out of 4, about a quarter of the audience. And we are in a brand new platform. We've been talking about this for a few weeks. Hangouts over the air is going away. In fact, it's done. It is over this week. And so we are now using, if you're watching, you can see the logo in the lower right down here. This is Zoom. It's a fairly common video conferencing platform. And it enables us to stream it live to the YouTube page like we always do. And anyway, we are feeling our way through a new video platform. So we apologize for any inconsistencies, but hopefully the audio is good. And we're going a little early this week. As you can see, I am not in my closet. Actually, I have a much more spacious facility here at my house with better bandwidth. So
You got the city of Birmingham at your back there. That's pretty good.
yeah, see, I've got this mountaintop resort overlooking the city back here. Not many people have a green wall in their house. My wife is a very loving person, and for those that don't know, chroma key green does not fit in with any home decor. I mean, none whatsoever.
It is the most designer color of all designer colors.
So Nate, where in the? I'm trying to figure out where you are. You're obviously in some random city, not in North Carolina.
Well, if you look closely,
No, it's not a Hampton.
you'll see the clock that you might see on the coverage of the ball drop at New Year's Eve. This is New York City, Midtown Manhattan. And
Manhattan.
with a view like this on the 41st floor, I figured I needed to, put the window back here. So we had a little mise en scene.
What is this all about, Nate? You apparently got the suite there. I mean, did you get the presidential suite or?
No, this room is. I have a closet at home larger than this room.
That's the Yotel, New York City, doesn't it?
The view, yeah, exactly. It's just the way it is. It's funny because the room literally next door to mine is not just a room; it's the Conrad Hilton suite. It makes me wonder how many times Paris has spent the night just right over there.
Paris has nothing to do with Hilton's now. That's a common misconception.
Anymore, that's to be sure.
I'll wave at you tomorrow, Nate. I'm flying overhead going to Boston tomorrow, so I'll just stick my hand out the window and wave at you. How about that?
You're not taking the train to Boston, James? You can take the train to Boston.
Man, I ain't got time for that. I'm excited. We have. I have never been up there. Our 2 boys have been several times, but I have never been up on the Green Monster. So we have Green Monster row 1 seats.
Ooh.
Did they sweep the
We'll be
Yankees?
able to watch
I didn't.
for you on ESPN tomorrow night.
Yeah, there.
Oh, yeah.
Fox Sports Boston or whatever.
Did they sweep the Yankees or was it a 3-1?
They won 3 out of 4. 3 out of 4. So, but I was thinking about getting a WeatherBrains logo and holding it up out there. Whenever they.
Speaking of logos, you're supposed to show our special logo for tonight, and you haven't done that yet.
Don't even. I'm not going to try that till later.
Go ahead and tempt us, Bill.
It's all we can do to get us on the air right now. Troy Kimball has been, and we've been here for like an hour and a half testing.
I know we had to eat dinner through this test hangout and chewing on rotisserie chicken over here.
Troy,
No.
Troy, the trooper down in Austin, Texas, we have tried screen shares. We know that it works. In fact, I'm excited about our guest and the topic here. But anyway, Troy was one of the first in, and we have made it. So, Troy, in fact, I want to say the video quality looks even better here.
I agree
No
with
question. No
you. I
question.
believe it does. Yeah.
Not even comparative. Oh yeah,
Uh-oh.
Dr. John's screen sharing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to see how this looks on over on the YouTube side. Yes. So for those watching on YouTube, you're seeing Dr. John Scala's computer screen, and we are in a small box in the upper right. This works really nice. So John,
I like this.
looks like a little water vapor satellite, a little infrared. What you got going on here?
Yeah, that's it. That's the best way. I used to start my synoptic class with a water vapor loop, and every student was required to provide a 10-minute discussion on water vapor. They hated it.
I see a lot. I see a lot going on here, man. But I see the monsoon cranking up in the southwest, which is kind of awesome.
There it is.
Yep.
Yeah. It is that time of the year for our friends in Phoenix and Las Vegas and places like that, and see some drier air not too far from us, and big thunderstorm, big convection pocket. This is awesome. But John, we took us an hour and a half, but we've got your audio back, so now we can start the show.
I know, and I finished my dinner in the process, so it was awesome.
I want to
And
see
we've got Aubrey-
if John can cause that to go away, because I got locked up during testing.
Yeah, I'm actually working on it right now, Troy.
This is the rest of the show right here.
You
All
might
of
be
us
looking
talking
at-
over a water vapor image.
There he is.
Your family.
Now we're seeing
Really
John's personal photographs up here. This is great.
Heading in the right direction.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Couldn't get
So,
out of it. I tried to.
I'm trying.
Yeah, my whole screen is John's computer.
Yeah. So anyway,
Not sure
we've got Aubrey or Banowitz. Aubrey, are you on the air tonight doing TV? You've got to be. You're in the studio.
I'm doing TV at some point.
Okay.
Not sure when. But
So it's like 8:29. You've got kind of a break right here, right?
I've got a little bit of a break, so I'm not on again until 10. Today's Monday, 10 o'clock tonight. So
Why we should be doing a show at 7 every week.
yeah, I can participate this week.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, we're trying to see how to. John's going to try and stop sharing. It might take us an hour and a half to figure out how to get off of here.
Oh,
If I click that share button, I might blow this thing up.
Yeah.
Under
I
view
can't see
options.
myself anymore now.
Yeah.
No.
I think if you hit what I do, I hit the escape key, and it goes back to the little window where you can go in there and see all the controls and everything. So
I'm trying.
Escape.
I'm trying.
What about that share
I've learned
button at
my
the
lesson.
bottom?
I'm afraid what other pictures will show up on this thing.
Wow.
there you go. Yeah, we
Thank
know
you
that,
for sharing your feelings with the group.
So what did you do, John, to do that, to get back?
There's a little red icon in the top that says
bet
stop
there is.
sharing.
Oh, that would be the one.
Yeah. We're just praying that John has not been visiting nightcallnurses.com or something.
Nate was trying to find that when Troy was talking.
What was that again? Was that, James? Night call what? Okay.
Nightcallnurses.com.
Never mind. Thank you.
There was an R-rated movie when I was a teenager, like 16, called Night Call
my
Nurses. We were gonna sneak in. We had this big grandiose plan to sneak in and see an R-rated movie, and we never had the guts to get in there. We got within one block and we ran. All right, Bill, let's bring in our guests before they run.
Well, I'll start. I'll let Nate introduce our guest panelist tonight. Nate,
Our guest panelist is somebody I think the first person I thought of when I saw who we're going to have for our guest for tonight. She is Violeta Yas from NBC and Telemundo in Philadelphia, primarily on Telemundo, although she does pinch hit on NBC from time to time. Born in Argentina, raised in New Jersey. She has a degree from Rutgers, the state university thereof. And she joins us this evening to help us along with our topic of bilingual meteorology. Violeta, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. I was really excited to hear about the topic. I actually chatted a little bit with Joseph on on Twitter how it's a topic I'm very passionate about. So seeing it being explored is very exciting. So thank you for thinking of me.
And can you show us the background? Because I just want to rub this a little bit, and everybody else. I'm not that kidding, but this is from the new Comcast Technology Center. This is the view. They have a weather center with windows.
Wow.
What a concept!
What a concept!
Right?
Yeah.
I know, right? that's not the best view either. There are some good ones, but yeah,
So is that view to the west, Violetta? Is that to the
what's
west?
that?
Is your view
This
to the
is
west?
facing northwest. Yes.
Okay, so if I raise my hands, can you see me? I'm out there.
Yeah. The resolution on this is great.
We know you're out there, John. Yeah.
Thanks, Troy.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, Violetta. And tonight's guest weather brain is a suggestion of listener Austin McDonald. Our weather brain tonight is a graduate student at OU studying communications. His bachelor in meteorology is from Texas A&M. He's currently working at Sims and NSSL. That may have been too many S's. I'm not sure. Focusing on social sciences along with bilingual communications. Joseph Trujillo, welcome to Weather Brains.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone watching today. It's a very exciting episode, especially to kind of promote things in the bilingual science community world. And actually, let's take the time right now to share our new logo.
There we go. You're the only one brave enough to do that, Joseph.
I don't have the guts. I don't have the guts.
All right. Everybody.
How about that, ladies and gentlemen?
So
that's what I'll be holding up on the green monster tomorrow night.
Well, on the count of three, everybody. 1, 2, 3. Mentes.
Meteorologist. Oh, yeah, I love it.
I took Latin in high school, never took Spanish.
All right, so you're in charge of next week's logo then, Spam. So get started on that.
I'll do the Latin session, yeah.
Joseph, I don't know if you noticed in the contract that came over that you signed to be on the show tonight. You know, it's obligatory that you talk about how you got interested in meteorology and how you got to where you are today. So take just a minute and introduce us to you.
Of course. Well, first off, I was very, very passionate about everything in terms of just the weather ever since a very small age. When I was 5 years old, I was born in Lima, Peru. And, I don't know why anybody would be fascinated with the weather over there, but I guess it just happened. And moving here to the United States was a complete shift. Lived in Dallas, Texas. And of course, that's kind of what woke me up to it. I was very afraid of thunderstorms throughout all my life. And my mom literally had to drag me out by the ear outside and told me, okay, you need to stop fearing that. And that's kind of what blossomed my love for meteorology. I went on to Texas A&M to get a bachelor's degree in meteorology. And it's just been something that has always been close to my heart. And just growing up, my mom doesn't understand any English whatsoever. And just going every single day up to her, trying to tell her about my passion was a little bit difficult. But she would, of course, like any good mother would, she would kind of sit down with me and try to understand a lot of the things that I'm trying to explain to her. And so we'd turn on the TV and a Spanish meteorologist would be on and I'd be like, hey, look, Mom, that's the weather for the day and things like that. But growing up, I did notice that even till this day, there's not terminology out there in Spanish that is translated as of this moment from English. And so that's kind of what blossomed this kind of passion for bilingual science communication. And so I kind of got my bachelor's in meteorology and also in Spanish and decided to dig into this issue more. And thanks to Kim here, by the way, she's one of my supervisors here, along with Dr. Cody Berry. They were amazing enough to get me into Sims and NSSL to where we can have a much bigger influence in bilingual science communication and introduce some methods to kind of spread it more on a nationwide scale and get some things rolling.
So Joseph, what led you to kind of make your communications focus communications?
Of course, I think that just going throughout my meteorology degree and thinking about, okay, well, we need to increase sort of different proposals and methods and initiatives in the Spanish language, but what's the best way to approach that? And as I was going along, I was thinking, well, communication theories are just so fascinating and such a wonderful thing that could be added along with meteorology to produce better effects. Because I think the science of just social scientists everywhere is increasing. It's becoming more important. And I think, at least personally, that was the angle I wanted to take it, just because the theories support it. And I think, you know, if we're trying to implement these sorts of things, let's do it in a one time around with proven theories and components that kind of lead you towards that route, and let's get it done.
Now, you mentioned some words that are lost in translation. What are some of the key ones that you've run across that are difficult?
I think one of the biggest things, the ones that really get my mind jogging a little bit, is English. Of course, you wouldn't really notice the difference between the word warning and the word advisory. But in Spanish, it's kind of a very similar word. It's not similar whatsoever, but it looks the same. So for example, warning in Spanish is aviso and advisory is advertencia. But people are using that, however, right now to where they're kind of using them in conjunction. National Weather Service office may be using warning as aviso and advisory as advertencia, but a TV station may be flipping that around. And I wouldn't necessarily blame it on the person themselves, but it's really on where you were raised, where you were born, the cultures you kind of encountered for you to develop that interpretation of Spanish. And that's kind of what we're going to dig into a little bit today, is how dialects kind of affect the way you interpret Spanish and how that's affecting our science communication world at this moment.
So Violetta, have you run into that before? That's interesting.
Absolutely. You see me over here just like, yeah. It's so true. You know, everything he said, even, you know, the technology that we have, you know, for instance, some of the translation tools that we have available on pretty widely used systems, like, for example, WSI, the translations aren't always complete or correct. You know, so it becomes a little difficult sometimes, you know, when you're really trying to give really specific information. And I use this example all the time. For example, a query tool, you know, you check, for instance, the hail within a thunderstorm, and the box that comes up will say, tamaño de granizo, he. So it's like, you know, only sort of half translated, and then, you know, there's a sort of extra responsibility on you to verbalize that sort of thing. And then, you know, just totally piggybacking off this point of how there aren't really, I think now there is more, but widely accepted and consistent translations to a lot of words. You know, just like you said, something as simple as a watch warning sometimes offers a lot of confusion. I think even terminology in Spanish in weather is more complicated. For example, and again, this is getting kind of technical, but, you know, in English, fog is fog, you know, and if it's dense, then, you know, you can sort of reiterate how low the visibility is. But in Spanish, there's a different word there's niebla and neblina, which niebla is if the visibility is below a quarter of a mile, whereas neblina is if it's above. So it's just, you know, even as a native speaker, when I got into the business, I'm like, this is great. It was like you essentially have to learn an entirely new, you know, science vocabulary. So, you know, just on top of sort of getting adjusted to the on-air aspect of things, there's just so many additional challenges. Like, words are much longer. You know, dew point in Spanish is punto de condensación. So, you know, things take more time to explain. So a lot of times, you know, people will watch my Spanish broadcast and they're like, you're going a mile a minute, you know, what are you saying? It's like,
because it takes 5 times as many words to say some of the you know, things that we have shorter words in English for.
Yes. So it's a challenge. And then, you know, when I fill in on the NBC side, and then, you know, I'm going a mile a minute and they're like, relax, you know, so there's it's tricky. There are a lot of challenges, I think, that, you know, make to a non-native speaker or somebody who is not bilingual wouldn't think of.
So those 2 words that you mentioned for fog, did they predate meteorologists? Were they just a function of the language, or did they come around as weather people needed them?
You know what? I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'm not sure, I guess, where the distinction originated. I do think in general, though, again, that's, I guess, being a little more technical. I think in general, people will sort of go with one or the other, and it's generally understood, that you're referring to fog. But, again, even the tools we have are very limiting, because you'll sort of go to highlight a watch, a warning, anything like that, and sometimes the wrong word is there. So when you're trying to sort of preach consistency and give your audience consistency, it's difficult.
All right, Kim, she just threw the two famous words out there, watch and warning.
Yeah.
So take it, run with that, Kim.
Gosh, yeah, watch and warning is tough in English. There's something that I often think, as Joseph, you were talking too. I mean, as much as we have distinct words for advisory and warning, the meaning of those is not even universally understood. And people can generally intuit the difference between a watch and a warning, but when advisory is thrown into the mix, and this is what the Hazard Simplification Project has found, most people just have no idea. So they're separable, but the idea is still challenging to convey. That it's a sub-severe warning, of course.
Yeah.
There's nothing natural about that at all, just owing to the language and the way the language is structured. This all sounds very interestingly familiar.
And I think overall, like if we even branch out to the basic definition of weather, you have two very distinct definitions in Spanish at this moment. The correct one is el tiempo, but what a lot of Central American countries and maybe even some Southern American countries are using at the moment is clima, but that's climate. And so I know we stress so hard nowadays between the difference between weather and climate here in English, but people are definitely using them interchangeably way more often in Spanish. You will see, if you turn on a TV channel, you'll even see some stations saying el estado del clima, or as a direct translation, the state of the climatology, rather than the state of, like, a weather segment or a weather forecast. And so it's just establishing this consensus between the entire community with even the most fundamental definitions, I think, is very important, at least at this given time.
And that's not even limited to, maybe, an entry-level publication. If you look and Google El Clima, what you'll get is your everyday weather forecast. And even in some very reputable publications, you'll see it. So I think that's a perfect example for sort of how much work is left to be done, and sort of the need there is there for credible information. So yeah.
And if you Google translate el tiempo, you get the time.
Yeah.
So it's like you get the time or the climate.
Yeah. And so just even imagine that as saying a bilingual broadcast meteorologist trying to communicate a message out to your audience. Say maybe you're a time constraint, or there's additional pressures going on, there's severe weather. You can't even rely on things like Google Translate at that point. Yeah. You just have to kind of go with your gut. And like I mentioned before, where you're raised or where you were born from is kind of where you kind of resort to. And that could really change the way you describe certain phenomenon. And then that can cause some overall communication problems between like the whole community as a whole.
And I think that, that also, not knowing the difference or using both interchangeably it presents other problems, because there's a huge Hispanic population in a lot of the states that are really obviously everyone is, but there's a large Hispanic population in some of the states that are even more so affected by climate change. A lot of the heat issues, flooding issues in New York and California. So I think it's just becoming even more and more important for them to know the difference and how it will affect them. There's a lot of Hispanics that work in agriculture. It's just becoming more and more important for them to know the difference.
And so those are great examples of words that are confusing and misused and just hard to deal with. What are some other ones, Joseph? Any other ones you can think of, terms that we can talk about?
Well, we can do a fun example here, just so we can
we love fun examples.
Exactly. So let's do this. Let's put this on here.
Oh, I love it.
Woo, okay.
Slides.
Yeah, slides. Let's do this thing. So
this is where Kevin would fuss at us. So Joseph, you have to describe the slide for our listening audience.
Oh, we definitely will. So first off, I just kind of want to bring up, so we've been talking about different terminology and how different people are saying different things. But there's a reason, and it's due to international regional dialects. And we've briefly been explaining that, but I kind of want to dig into it a little bit more. And so just for today's sake, for example, I mean, a cold front passed through like earlier this past week. And so maybe this isn't a real good example, but I mean, it's still summer. So let's just say you are craving a caramel sundae, for example.
That looks good.
That looks so good, doesn't it?
How many calories is that, Joseph?
Actually, I don't want to think about that. Oh, no.
Mess everything up. You know?
We just went off carbs today.
Right.
Y'all let Joseph do this.
And I think here in America, you know, the biggest sort of debate we have at this moment is it caramel or caramel? But other than that, we can all agree that the terminology is caramel sundae, or that's what we're going to describe this as. So say it's
By
a
the
very
way,
hot...
I'd just like to point out that you haven't been in Oklahoma too long, because most people in the Southern Plains call it caramel. There's 2 syllables and not 3. I get grief every time I visit my in-laws in Texas because it's caramel there, and I pronounce it caramel because there's clearly 3 syllables.
Caramel.
At school.
And so let's say that it's a very hot and sunny day outside, and you want to go to your best friend Jose's house, and you want to invite him for a caramel sundae. And he's actually from Mexico, and his mom opens the door and only speaks Spanish. And you're like, oh my goodness, what do I say? You pull up a quick Google search and you say, hola, señora, ¿me puedes dar un sundae de cajeta? And she's just like, yeah, sure. Or can I go get a sundae de cajeta with your son, Jose? And she's like, of course, let me go get him. And y'all are out and about. But of course, y'all can't forget about your friend Pedro. He's from Argentina. And you knock on his front door, and his mom opens the door as well and says, do you need anything? And they tell them, oh, we want to go get sundae de cajetas with your son. Well, she actually smacks you on the wrist a little bit, because that word is a very bad word in South America. I don't even want to describe what that means. And so you're in a little bit of trouble there, because that's not how you say caramel sundae in Argentina. You actually say that as sundae de dulce de leche. And other examples.
We want to know what the other one meant, though. Just left that out.
My goodness.
I'm moving.
Have an audience out there. And just a couple more examples. In Colombia, we have a sundae de arequipe. And where I'm from in Peru, we call it a sundae de manjar blanco. So again, this just comes from where you were born in the culture that you were raised in. One word like caramel sundae could suddenly have 4 different definitions. And if you actually go look up on Google, you could probably find 3 more of these, just depending on the country to where you're from. But if we relate this a little bit more to meteorology, for example, the way we describe rain is, you'll hear it often, aguacero, lluvia, and chubasco. But again, depending on where you're from or where you were raised, you could describe it as a chaparrón, a chaparrada, or even a diluvio. And so now you have all these completely different words to describe one given terminology. And as meteorologists, our main goal is to communicate this out to the public. But which words are we going to use? And like I mentioned before as well, the very big sort of dilemma in the meteorological community right now is trying to define warning and advisory. I mean, you could take a quick look at it and you're going to have to rub your eye a little bit to see that they may be looking a little bit similar. And meteorological agencies and broadcast companies alike are using these interchangeably. And so that's how kind of we can get lost in the sauce when it comes to, say, the Spanish language. And it's not even just from where you were born. Like, for example, I think a very interesting article that I read from the New York Times asked, what do you call the road on the side of the freeway? Like, what would you call that? I'll open it up to everybody.
The service road.
Service road, right?
Frontage road.
Frontage road. And at Texas A&M, a lot of people come from Houston and they call it the feeder road.
Yep.
And so
Wow.
you add those regional dialects, or how we speak depending on the regions in the United States, and you make this an even bigger and more complicated process to where we don't even have to consider where we're born, but where we're growing up in.
But Joseph, being from Texas A&M, we're always right. So, like that, Nate.
Yeah, I think another.
Although my wife went to A&M, so she is always right in our house.
Good choice, Nate. I interrupted you, Joseph. Go ahead.
No. I was saying that in the winter, sort of the difference in terminology becomes even more evident, because your audience in a lot of cases is from an area where winter really doesn't exist, or at least not sort of in the capacity that we know it as in the Northeast, for example. So it's really critical to really educate your audience on, for example, the difference between snow and sleet and, and ice and freezing rain, where, I think even people who lived here all their life might not really know the difference between freezing rain and sleet, but imagine having never seen it before, so there's sort of this an extra responsibility to not only deliver the actual forecast, but you really need to explain to your audience that difference, because they in many cases are from places that it's foreign to them.
So how do you do that in Spanish, Violetta? Or would it take the rest of the show for you to make that explanation in Spanish?
I asked for a lot of time.
The wise producers, give it to her.
Yes, I will say, I'm very thankful. Our news director really values weather, and also understands that need. So, if we've got some weather going on and I need more time, I never get a hard time about it. So I'm very thankful for that. An oxygen tank also helps. But yeah, essentially in some cases, I would really need to take one hit, for example, and really focus on just explainers like that, and then another one for the actual forecast. So it's kind of doubles, the workload in terms of the information.
It's interesting. I want to throw this out at this point, because when NBC bought the Telemundo station group 5-6 years ago, we did a research, and I say we, I wasn't here back then, but the research project was done. And what they found was that Spanish language news viewers would watch some of the Spanish language news and then would flip over to the English language stations for weather, and then would flip back. And I've seen this also in some of the academic literature. I think there's a paper out of maybe SIMS or NSSL that sort of touched on this tangentially. And at that point, they said, we need to make a commitment to, to these viewers, that we're gonna provide them something they're not getting right now, and that is, weather forecasts and explanations and coverage by credentialed meteorologists. And if we had people in roles that weren't credentialed meteorologists, well, then we're gonna spring forward and get them degrees, get them certification, so that they really could provide that level of service to that audience. Something that I think English audiences have sort of taken for granted in a lot of places, that the person that they see on television every night is a credentialed meteorologist or has some sort of formal education. A paper that I helped, I contributed to in BAMS a couple of months ago, shows that the vast majority of people on TV do have some form of formal meteorological training, whether that's a degree, Mississippi State certification, a minor in meteorology or something like that. That was not the case in Spanish language TV 5 years ago. And that's one thing where we've really committed to serve those audiences in the way that we would serve everyone else. And I think Violetta is a really good example of somebody, just to brag on her just a little bit, who really, embodies that, for us, and really takes that role very seriously, and as seriously, I think, as it should be.
Yeah, I mean, even if the fact that I moved to Philly in 2014, And that was to launch our Telemundo station. There was no Telemundo station in this big as Philadelphia, you know, as far back as 2013. So, you know, I feel like that was very telling, because even when the opportunity came about and I started kind of looking into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was flabbergasted that there wasn't already a station here. And you know, there is another Univision affiliate here. I think they're a very small team. You know, some of their stuff is recorded. They don't have any local weather. They source it out from the network in Miami. So, you know, if we have a crazy day during the show, which oftentimes we do, there was nobody here. I believe I'm still the only Spanish-speaking TV meteorologist in the whole city. So, you know, it just goes to show you how much of a need there is there. And, you know, speaking to Nate's point about, you know, sort of in the American DMA, it being taken for granted that, you know, pretty much everyone you see on TV has some sort of science background. It's very true. And I think that's part of the reason almost why on the Spanish side of things, sort of the expectation is very low, because, you know, if you go watch a weather forecast on TV in a lot of their home countries, you know, you're going to get someone in a very tight dress, sort of just kind of pointing at things. Unfortunately, it's very disappointing.
Don't get Joseph started. He's shaking his head over there.
But it's true. So, you know, I get messages on Facebook sometimes like, hey, why don't you dress, you know, a little more this way?
Oh, no.
I'm not kidding. Last week I got it. I'm not kidding. You know, so it's just not really what they're used to. So, you know, like Nate said, it's something I take really seriously, sort of putting an end to that stereotype, because, you know, they really need that information, and there's a limited amount of resources from where they can get it.
One other interesting point to throw on top of that is that in many cities in the United States, the #1 rated newscast, regardless of language, is not in English. In New York, it's Spanish. Late news here in New York, the 11 o'clock news, the #1 rated newscast is Telemundo, New York. Same thing in Miami, same thing in Houston, same thing in California. Some of these cities you would expect, but some you would not without really thinking about it. And so these are a lot of people that are counting on, you know, somebody to provide this information, to provide those explanations, to and during severe weather, you know, to really connect them with really life-saving information. This is just a great topic to be talking about, because I think it's something that, much like we have on the English side with watch and warning, you know, we need to have consistent terminology on the Spanish language side that's just, for one, internally consistent, but also has some sort of a mirror with English language terms, so that translations are easier, because we know in some cases some of these translations are going to be done either on the fly or they're going to be done with machines, and we want to make sure that they're consistent for everybody.
I'm glad you bring that point up, Nate, because first of all, alluding to the markets and everything, back where I was raised in Dallas, Texas, the #1 station there is their Telemundo Dallas station, and a lot of people pay close attention to it. And in terms of consistency, I agree with you as well. You know, in English, at least we have things like the AMS glossary that we can resort to just in case we want to know definitions for a given term. But that doesn't exist at the moment currently in Spanish. And so it's left up to the individuals to kind of make up their own terminologies. And even after asking around a couple communities, like in Los Angeles, for example, their meteorology terminology doesn't really come from, like, for example, one of the TV meteorologists from their Telemundo station talked to me and told me that they don't have any sorts of dictionary to resort to, but the emergency managers made one. And so that's kind of what they're using, so they can both be in conjunction with one another. And so in terms of consistency between the bilingual community, there's no official glossary that exists, but look at other Latin American countries like Mexico or Chile, and there's one right on in there. And there's one in Spain, for example. but there's nothing really official here in the United States. And I think that's a very good first crucial step that we must take as a bilingual weather community, is establishing at least a set of reference so we can move on forward and now start educating our communities on what these terms mean. And so we can leave this problem in the past.
Well, Joseph, I let me ask you, I mean, I think Violetta and Joseph, this is the second week. Last week, we dealt with the Navajo Nation. We talked about that last week and how certain words, you know, would actually tell people differently than what we would expect it to be with an advisory or warning or a watch. And we're hearing that again tonight. And I guess my question for Violetta and for Joseph would be, would we ever be able, with this strange dialect we have as meteorologists, to ever come up with anything that's going to be able to translate properly into the language?
I agree with you that, you know, there are various translations that we have to consider. And, you know, we're not going to please every single person out there in the United States. But I think that instead of just resorting to about 7 or 8 different terms to describe one thing, we can at least start off with the consistency angle, where we should all just be using more familiar, more of these universal terms to kind of describe these the weather terminology. And I think the most important thing of all is the educational component, so that you know, our broadcasts, or at least between the bilingual broadcast community, it's much smaller, and everyone can come into consensus and an agreement. And in a short while, I'll be showing you a little bit of what we've been working with in the Storm Prediction Center to kind of make those weather risk terminologies, for example, a lot more consistent. Because I think if we can ride on that boat a little bit, we can get some things going to where we can start reinforcing a couple of terms more than just going.
And that's and I was one of the people, and I know some other people were on here as well, that were on with Eli Jackson, the people at headquarters in Washington last week, on the watch warning advisory webinar. And one thing you can say, and I've made this clear in my response to Eli, I don't think we've done a very good job with education. You're wondering why people don't know the difference between a watch, advisory, and warning. I don't think broadcasters have done a good job, and I don't think the National Weather Service necessarily has done a good job in educating the public about what those terms mean. And I believe that's where we've got to start. You can change terms until the cows come home, but we got to try this educational effort, I believe, before we do anything else. But that's just Troy's opinion.
And by the way, in terms of the National Weather Service, I do want to bring something up that just became national this past year. Like, everyone's, first of all, noticing this problem in our community, and that we need consistency, and we need these organizations to kind of take a hold of this problem to start this educational campaign going. And so, for example, the National Weather Service has a team. They're called the Multimedia Assistance in Spanish team. They're first of all, like, comprised of National Weather Service meteorologists. It's more of a volunteer organization, to where if a weather service office needs some sort of material, they can submit a form, and they can just give them a short while, and they'll give a product back out to you in the Spanish language. And this started off as being regional. It was based on the San Antonio weather office here in Texas, or back in Texas. And as of this past year, it just became nationwide. And so they're kind of taking that angle and that approach, because an alternative, for example, to reach the Spanish speakers in the US by translations. They also provide television and radio interviews if the Weather Service ever needed them, and then social media and educational material. So it's slowly coming together, and I'm very, very proud and happy that this group has come along. And I definitely agree that we can do more in that aspect too.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's important to point out, you said you can't please everyone, but we can absolutely do better than what we're doing. And I think the glossary, like you said, it would be a really, really good starting point. I totally agree.
So is there a formal process underway to make that happen?
Let's get it going.
I don't know. So, for example, like here at NSSL, I've been in close contact with the Multimedia Assistance in Spanish team lead. His name is Orlando, and he's been great at, first of all, getting this organization rolling on a nationwide scale, but they also have come up with their own sort of terminology from within that organization. So they have material and they're already rolling it out. We have everything ready to go. It's just a matter of fact of getting it out there. And about a month ago, I got in contact with the AMS glossary editor, and we're starting that conversation. We're getting those things rolling. But in terms of getting everyone organized, I think a very important point is to also unite the bilingual weather community. I think you can agree, Violeta, is that we're very small, but we're also very dispersed. And sometimes we can get lost in our own messaging and our own jobs, essentially, to bring everybody together once again. And so in terms of the American Meteorological Society, we've proposed under the Board on Women and Minorities to come up with an AMS Latinx committee this upcoming January, so we can start gathering people together, put them in one room, and get this conversation rolling to where we're not just talking in the national organizations, or we're not just talking within the TV broadcasters, but we're making more of a joint statement overall. And I mean, fingers crossed, the Board on Women and Minorities is going to vote whether this committee is going to come into play this January. And if it all comes, I think that's a good framework to get something rolling in terms of the glossary, because now we have some more organizational support that can push that initiative.
Yeah, I would love to be a part of that. You know, if they are able to get the votes, it's again something I'm really passionate about. It's important. There's a need. Like you said, there aren't a ton of us, but we could definitely be a more united front. So I would love to be a part of that.
Well, there you go, Joseph, right there. We're making matches on WeatherBrains. That's what we do. Or I'm sorry, Mentis Meteorologius. Yeah, that one. So Joseph, we haven't really talked about your initiative very clearly. We probably danced around it. Talk about what you're working on right now.
Of course. I actually, once again, have a short little PowerPoint.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. And so let me get this.
Guest ever.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. And so here, for example, in the
man.
Yeah, are we not used to these, right? This is what
Troy's hair just got on fire.
Trying to make this, the thought of trying to make this in Spanish just gave me so much anxiety.
Oh no, exactly.
It was going to be triple the size.
No, exactly. And so the Storm Prediction Center, I mean, we're all familiarized with them. Their severe weather risk categories go from marginal all the way up to high. But if you visit the SPC website, you will also find a graphic in Spanish. Mínimo, leve, elevado, moderado, y alto, respectively. And a couple of broadcasters use this graphic and they to describe severe weather risk for their given days and to just kind of put that out to the community and educate them. However, so this is what actually really initiated my passion for bilingual science communication, because back at A&M, I was doing a weather radio show in Spanish. One of my mentors from Telemundo told me, hey, get that initiative going at Texas A&M. And I was showing them this graphic, and one of my viewers told me, look, and here I'm circling it out in red. Aisladas is the same word in levels 1 and 2. That means isolated in coverage. But when we compare that to the English version, they are differentiated, isolated, and scattered.
Wow.
And so you already have some translation deficiencies going on from within this same Spanish graphic. And as well, yes, I did get my bachelor's in Spanish, but I'm not a translator. So I wanted to go see what other mistakes there were. And so after consulting with a certified translator, everything else you see circled in blue there are also translation errors coming from this graphic itself.
Oh. Wow.
And so, and a lot of it had to be due because there was more direct translations going on rather than things that are more adaptable to our community. And so that's kind of what got this project going, saying, why don't we come up with a scale that really benefits our communities overall? Because this graphic, once it's put out to the public, could be interpreted very differently. And that's what I'm kind of here to show you as to how the different broadcast stations, for example, use these 5 given terms by the Storm Prediction Center to kind of give their own sort of interpretation and how they relate it out to their communities. So for example, the national news in Univision, what you see there to the right side are the 5 risk levels. The ones in black are in abidement by the SPC definitions. But as you can see in this given example, levels 1, 2, and 3 are actually different. They change them on their own to their own definitions, their own given words. So,
not by the way, unlike many English language stations that have
true
category numbers. But
Yeah. And so that's your morning show. You tune into your afternoon news segment, and levels 2 and 3 are changed, but level 1 isn't. And so this pattern is kind of all across the bilingual broadcast meteorologists in general. They're coming up, some of them are coming up with their own terms because the translated ones don't really appeal to them as much. They were more of direct translations. They don't really know how to describe that. And so those colored in red there are terms they're coming up with themselves. Even out in the East Coast, you don't even have to be in Texas to notice that. Now there's some.
That was Nate's former station right there.
Oh, it was.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Former market.
How do you say Torcon in Spanish?
I don't know.
The first buzzer on the new platform. I love it.
Yeah.
No honor. And so, for example, AccuWeather in Espanol has been something that has been increasing overall in the Spanish community. And they abide by the SPC definitions, mínimo all the way out to alto. So this is their national platforms. And they also have some affiliates that through Telemundo, for example, in Charlotte, that they abide by the SPC definitions. Telemundo is a completely different scenario. You have some stations like the one in DC that abide by the SPC definitions, and in Dallas as well. But then you have Miami, for example, where levels 1, 3, and 5 are switched up. Now I want you to pay close attention to level 5, because the SPC definition, level 3 is elevado, but they actually put that out as level 5 to indicate that. And a reason for that is that word kind of gives a little bit more urgency. So I'm guessing that this station, that's kind of what they said, that elevado gives a little more urgency than alto does. And so that's why they made it level 5. But here's the thing, since no one's consistent with what they're saying, we have a very big issue going on right now that you don't even have to be in Miami. You could be here in Tornado Alley here in Oklahoma, and where you just change a channel, or you drive 2 hours to the south, and you're going to have different definitions based on your severe weather category.
So I'm going to ask you a question in regards to this, because one of the first things I learned in this role, and we actually have more Telemundo weathercasters than we have NBC weathercasters in this group, or certainly more stations than Telemundo. And one of the things I learned very early was that in a lot of cases, the populations in some of the audiences are different. So obviously in Miami, it's much more Caribbean. You've got the Puerto Ricans, you've got Cubans, more Caribbean audience. Whereas in, say, Denver, the Hispanic audience is primarily, the Spanish language audience is primarily, from Northwest Mexico. Is that, going back to how we opened this conversation about regional dialects and everything, is that possibly at least part of why, an explanation of why that might work in those markets?
That is precisely the reason of why this is actually happening. You have the way people interpret this terminology for them to look at the SPC definitions and say, that's not really a word we like to use. And when I consulted with the translator, for example, let me go back to the 5 SPC definitions, like a lot of people don't even know what the word leve means. I didn't know what that meant. I had to look it up. And so that's actually based more on regionality and dialects in general, rather than given definitions. And so that's why people are changing things to where they kind of interpret it more. Like this example, you have muy leve and leve. A translation is very marginal and marginal, or very slight and slight, sorry. And so again, it is based on those dialects. And this is why it's so important to not just say that, but to actually show you that our television stations across the United States are kind of doing this just by accident. And again, I do not want to put blame on them, because they're doing their job. They're communicating this information out to the public in the best way that they think is possible. But I think what we're lacking of right now is that consistency we brought up before.
And Joseph, Kim, you're sitting here. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about in English, in Spanish, what dialect we are, but consistency is what's killing us here, right? I mean, Kim, from the social side, it's got to be consistent, right? Possibly,
honestly, and this is what I'm sitting here thinking. We aren't sure what the impact is of inconsistency. It might not be very material if you're receiving your messaging through one favored station, if you're not receiving the conflicting information. And even if you do receive the conflicting information, or apparently conflicting if you understand that the different stations have different systems. I think for me, what I'm really compelled by, one of the most important things I think that he's touched on so far, I mean, all of this is important, but I'm really drawn to the descriptions that the Storm Prediction Center has for those categories. Because while the categorical labels might not do all the work that we want them to do, they don't in English either. And we have, different stations doing different things around the country. I think right now, as long as you can explain it, because under those categories, the SPC has some technical definitions for likelihood of hazard and for the coverage. But to know
Kim,
that those essential elements are getting fumbled in Spanish, I think is an enormous issue to start with.
But Kim, I mean, you look at it, how many people understand the terminology difference between a TV station? I would contend that number is relatively small.
It's probably quite small, but we don't have any good information on if people are receiving this through multiple modalities. And another thing to raise here is even in English, we have differences in understanding for what the, like how bad those different categories are. So Joseph was there when we had the emergency managers experiment in May, and I loved having him and Austin, two communication grad students, sit there and listen to this as the EMs were telling us a marginal in one place, especially the central United States, didn't raise any feathers and they were doing nothing. But for people in New York, they were, bells and whistles were going, and a marginal doesn't mean a marginal, right? The impacts are quite different. So while the categories are about objective hazard probability, and we use the word risk, it's not actually risk. Risk is the probability times consequences is what risk is. So it bakes impact into there. When SPC calls these risk categories, the same, we could use the same categorical label in different places, but it wouldn't mean the same thing. Wow. So I think we have a lot of potential layers of complexity to the question of consistency. And even if we say the same word and technically mean the same thing in science speak, in society speak, it might still be different.
And you have the added complication that the same numerical probability for a particular type of storm might cause different types of impacts for different communities.
Yep.
You think about social vulnerability, for example, and whatnot. That the same storm affects different people differently.
Yep, that's exactly why that's exactly the issue. Is you just have populations where the vulnerability is different, but they also have adapted differently. But you can have the same vulnerability profile as classically defined by geographers and epidemiologists. You can have the same exact profile, but have a storm go through one population that's used to getting storms and another population that's not, and get two very different outcomes. So yeah, that is an interesting complexity, Nate. It really is. And I feel like, Joseph, I loved having you listen to that. So now, what does that make you think of when as you're pursuing this goal? What is your end goal? Are you hoping that everyone will use the same words? Are you looking to maybe get something that is locally adaptable for regions? There might be regions that strongly favor some particular solution, especially as you've covered that Spanish has this diversity. What does consistency mean to you in this context?
Well, thanks so much, Kim, for the question. I think overall, as I'm progressing here throughout graduate school, I'm, first of all, very, very interested in learning more about the topic overall and seeing what angle we need to be taking this in. I understand you can take it in the regional aspect, you can take it more on a nationwide aspect. And I think this is why one of the best things to do is open a conversation about it and hear all perspectives, because I may have made some of my own opinions, but listening to others and seeing the input, especially from professionals like Violeta that are actually out in the field and seeing feedback from audience members. I think all of it is important. Integrating not just meteorologists, but emergency managers, translators that we've never even considered before. And of course, our end users, our communities, the people that are actually interpreting this information. So I think at this moment, Kim, I can't answer the specific answer to say what angle I want to hit it at first. I think at this moment, I'm really curious to see what everyone out there thinks. And this is why I'm very grateful for WeatherBrains to consider this topic in the first place, because it's time to open this conversation out there. Let's get people talking. Let's see all these perspectives. And as I start carving out my master's and, oh gosh, knock on wood, hopefully my PhD on this.
By the way, we're already talking with him about keeping him for his PhD if he'll stay. That's already in. He started what, 6 weeks ago?
Oh
6
goodness!
Weeks, done all of this?
Yes, it was a big move and everything. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to kind of involving myself more in this study as I go throughout my graduate degree, and really understanding what consistency means, and really looking at other scholars that are currently going through the situation. Because I wouldn't say meteorology is the first ever to look at this. Health communication has an abundance amount of research in bilingual interpretations, because they have to communicate sicknesses and things to their own patients, and the way they interpret them in the terminology, I think is a great and valuable opportunity to learn from them too, to see how we can approach it in the meteorological angle. So I guess the answer to that is to be continued, right?
Yep, and that's a great answer. No.
And
research that. That's the party line at Sims. Good job.
And well, now that we have the time to do it, I think it's time to promote something here. Let's get this conversation rolling, right? At the AMS Centennial meeting, we are making a session, Dr. Gina Osco and I, called Translating Weather into the Spanish Language. So to any people out there, meteorologists that are interested in submitting an abstract to this, the deadline just got pushed to August 8th. Let's talk about these past and present challenges in translating weather, or existing resources that people can use, and ways to address these challenges in the future, of course. And so you can see this banner and then some other information on my Twitter page as well. But I think it's a crucial time to get this rolling. And if this AMS Latinx committee comes into life, this is where the solutions start rolling in. And so I encourage you guys too, if you guys know any bilingual meteorologists out there, let them know of this. And even some of you guys, come attend, come see us.
I'm upset. I just saw this on your page, I think yesterday, and I saw that the original deadline was the 1st, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And I need to put an update on that. Thanks for reminding me.
I was so upset because, again, I'm really interested in this. I sort of presented something similar at the Tri-State Weather Conference last year in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. So I was so bummed to see the deadline, but now that you pushed it to the 8th, I'm something in there. But yeah, I'm absolutely interested. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course. And yeah, if any of you guys know any other meteorologists out there that are interested in this or want to at least just talk about it, I think this is a great opportunity to, and let this be the first sessions of many, to where this is a new normal for our community, not just a session every now and then. Make it continual, get more people involved with this, and so we can strive for better solutions in the future.
Well, James, this might be a good place to break since we have to say goodbye to Violetta here in a second. So why don't you?
Yeah, and I appreciate the discussion. And let me just say this. I did a very poor job of reaching those that speak Spanish April 27, 2011 here. We had a tornado outbreak that killed 252 people in my state on that day. And we know we didn't lift a finger to help. So this has been a great discussion. It's very helpful for those of us that are in markets like mine where we don't have a Telemundo station. We have a lot of Spanish speaking radio stations, Bill, but we don't have the television presence here. So we're working on some solutions that will help. But this has been a great discussion. So thanks. And again, appreciate you. I feel like we've been here for 4 hours.
Some of us have.
Yeah. But
Can I also take the time to mention just a few more things just to get the word out there?
Joseph, plug away, baby. Go. Deserve it, man. Go.
Something important that I want to bring up here too is in this discussion, I think something very, something that we could take advantage of in this AMS discussion is that we're bringing the team lead of the multimedia assistance in Spanish will be there. And so he also wants to hear what meteorologists out there are thinking, because I think taking it in the angle from the National Weather Service to kind of push for these initiatives as well, so we can have more consensus overall, is a really good angle to consider. So I also encourage people to show up to that. Also here at the National Severe Storms Lab, we're working on the probabilistic hazard information project, and Kim is well aware of that. She just kind of explained a little about the emergency managers, but we're also incorporating broadcasters in here. And so, Violeta, this might be an interest of you too. We are looking for broadcast meteorologists to be testing out this new material. Just to describe a fee, Kim, could you help me out here a little bit?
Oh yeah, so the fee are just ahead of the warning scale. It's a plume of probability that says what the probability is that the storm will go on to produce a tornado or severe thunderstorm winds or hail. And we also have a probabilistic lightning product. So what it aims to do is just give you a little bit more information. We know when we issue warnings or when we don't issue warnings in the Weather Service that the forecaster has greater or lesser confidence sometimes in the storm. And this is a way to just help make that explicit, and also to extend the lead time of information that you're getting out beyond the average of 13 minutes to potentially about an hour of information. So it's gap filling. It's meant to be something between a watch and a warning, and to help the people that we work with to know a little bit more of our thinking about a storm.
And so consider that in the broadcast world, both English and Spanish speaking communicators will be impacted, and each may face unique challenges when passing along probabilistic information. And so with me here being part of this project, I want to open the door for bilingual meteorologists, broadcasters to take a hold of this. But of course, we welcome all broadcast meteorologists, including English speaking and bilingual, to apply for this year's iteration of here at the Hazardous Weather Testbed. And those interested can find more information at KFE_TV. I will also put that probably in the links that we're exposed to, or that we get to send out at the end of this presentation. But
all right, that's not an owl, is it, Kim?
Oh, it's an owl, and the reason it's an owl, I know after last week's conversation, the meaning of owls in different societies, it's not a death owl, so anyone from the Navajo Nation need not be worried about it. But the owl is because we do the broadcast experiment in a facility in the Weather Center called the Owl. It's the Oklahoma Weather Lab that the undergraduates run. So they did a pun, and we call them fee plumes. So the plumage of the bird.
The owl, yeah.
Yeah, they were really creative.
I thought that was a new TV station in Philadelphia there for a minute until I realized it started with a K.
Yeah, and actually that is a challenge we have with branding. It's what it is.
But yeah, broadcasters can, all expenses paid, come out here for a week, get exposed to this new material that we're working here at NSSL, and also give us an opportunity, especially you bilingual folks out there, to get this important angle in Spanish. Because if this is a product that gets put out in the future, I also want to make sure that our bilingual community is also smiling from cheek to cheek, I guess.
It's too bad Aubrey wasn't here to hear that all expense paid part, Troy. I think she missed that.
Aubrey participated last year. She is a certified.
There you go.
Expert. Nate, you were out there, and Troy's been with us. I mean, we've just got the Brady Bunch happening out.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that what Joseph said, and not to. I don't have to blow any wind up Kim's skirt here, but I'm telling you that
show title.
I know. But what an amazing program they put together in the test bed there in Norman, and what a good job Kim, you and all your colleagues did. I was there. Really, I didn't come in as a broadcaster. I was with Dr. Kevin Clazel, and we played emergency manager. Surprised he didn't kick us out of there long before the 5 days we were there. But you know something, Kim? I learned more in that week than I think I ever have anywhere, any conference anywhere. And I lay that to the good people in Norman, the people that are there, and people like Joseph and Kim and all the people. Really amazing program.
It's very wonderful of you to say thank you. And thank you for doing some more advertising for us. Hear that. It's a great, I mean, but it's an amazing educational opportunity. What you said you felt, our emergency manager participants every year and our broadcasters, they leave saying, when am I going to get this technology? At first, it does feel like a lot. It's a lot of information, but it's amazing how quickly you adapt to it and you sort of figure it out. And we're relying on everyone who's listening. We're relying on you to come and give us feedback and help us to make this work for the American public and try to put out a consistent message.
You think, Kim, I could with that promo that I got another invite maybe in the future?
Well, the door's always open to you, Troy. Always.
Thank you.
So we need a time machine. That's the only problem I have is time. Goodness gracious.
That's the guy who gets 4 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah.
8 hours more day than the rest of us.
We have to take a quick break. We got Tony Rice, and Tony has already been tweeting out the Brady Bunch look here. We are the Brady Bunch, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to take a quick break with Tony Rice and the Astronomy Report. We're going to come back with picks of the week and wrap this show up here. So again, if y'all can hang on this with a few more minutes, you have to go, y'all take off. But we're going to take a break for Tony.
Bye, Villa.
Yeah, I think Villa's got to go.
Thank you so
Bye.
much
Thank
for
you.
having me. Promos for the news. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you guys taking an interest in this topic. It's really, really awesome. I appreciate your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Y'all so much.
We'll be
Bye,
right
Joseph.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The full moon of July 31st is being called a black supermoon, and it's worth going out to take a look at later this week. Let's break down all these adjectives, though. It's a new moon, technically a lunar conjunction where the sun, moon, and earth line up so that sunlight is only striking the far side of the moon. But you knew that. The black name comes from the fact that it's the second new moon to fall in the calendar month of July. Should probably be a little more careful with that word fact, though. The moon turns new in July only in the Americas. In Europe and points eastward, that new moon falls the morning of August 1st. Europe eastward will get their black moon in August, but it won't be super. This upcoming new moon is technically a supermoon, at least by the definition of the astrologer who coined the term back in the 70s. He defined a supermoon as the new or full moon occurring near lunar perigee, or the point in the moon's orbit where it's closest to Earth. So we've got a black supermoon. Astrology and Farmer's Almanac derived names aside, this new moon is actually worth going outside to take a look at, because it's a great time to experience Earthshine. Earthshine is the faint illumination of the moon by sunlight reflected off the Earth's surface. There's a lot of factors that control just how much Earthshine we're able to see. One of the biggest is the amount of cloud cover, thousands of miles to the west of you. This impacts how much light is reflected. Look for features on the moon such as the darker mare and maybe even some more prominent craters. Da Vinci even wrote about his observations of Earthshine 500 years ago. With the moon lined up in front of the sun, though, it's pretty hard to see on the day of the new moon. But look just before sunrise tomorrow, July 30th, and after sunset the rest of the week. You'll see a thin crescent illuminated directly by the sun and the rest of the moon's disk faintly lit by Earthshine, more poetically described as the old moon in the new moon's arms. This works elsewhere in the solar system, too. More generically, it's called planet shine. It's been observed by the Cassini probe, illuminating the moons of Saturn and even its rings. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Let's do a weather roundup. This is for the 29th of July. And let's start with Troy. Troy, how's the heat down in Austin, Texas?
Yeah, I heard in that promo the word colder. What does that mean exactly? It's 89.3 in Austin right now, and we had 101 at Camp Mabry, which is our city long-term first-order site out at Austin Bergstrom International Airport. 97 today. Down at San Marcos down the road, they were also 100. And weather will probably change about the first week of October.
Yeah, that's the next time we'll see dew points in the 40s probably down here.
Yes.
Dr. John, what's happening up there in Lancaster, Pennsylvania? How like I'm going to Boston tomorrow. It looks hot.
It's heat and humidity's here. Yeah, no question. Since we had some guests in from Philadelphia, Philadelphia Northeast Airport got to 100 over the weekend, and we were pushing 96 here in Lancaster, which is pretty hot for this area of the world. It's deep summer weather for us. Dew points in the 70s as well. And before I forget, I wanted to mention to Kim, I was actually a member of the hazardous weather test bed long before the new building was in place. So I was actually out at the old SBC place. And I agree, even when that program got started, which is when I was there, wow, I still use some of the techniques from 15 years ago that I learned. That's a great program.
That's really cool. I didn't know that you'd gone through when it was at North Base. That's really wonderful. And it is, I mean, I can't claim any credit for the program's been long running. I'm just really excited that they've allowed us and they've embraced having this social science aspect built into it.
Absolutely.
It's great.
Yeah.
James, we could kid John about his age, but he has such perfect hair.
Oh, the hair of an angel. Nobody should have hair that good looking. So let's go to our East Coast correspondents. Aubrey, what's happening?
All right, unmute. Yeah, it's hot. Oop, let me plug in. Hang on. Okay, it's hot. And we're looking for the front to come in and stall out this week and bring us some much needed rain. We've been dry for I think about the last 8-9 days. So yeah, a little rain would be nice, help to cut some of those temperatures, but it really has not been humid. So it's been warming up over the last few days, but it really has not been humid. So kind of perfect summertime weather. It's been nice.
All right, Nate, what you got up there in Midtown Manhattan?
It's hot.
Hot.
Oh, that's
humid. We hit 90 even in Central Park. Had some pulse severe storms up in the Hudson Valley up toward Dutchess County earlier today, a little flash flooding up that way. Nothing here in the city. It looks like it'll be hot tomorrow. And then I'm supposed to go back home on Wednesday, and that's when all the storms arrive. And of course, that's when I'm trying to leave out of one of the busiest airports in the country. So yeah, I'm going to have to change flights.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Oklahoma correspondents, Kim, the heat's not that bad this summer out there, huh?
You know, we had a pretty good bout last week. We went over 100 a few times, and it was pretty. Gosh, we got into the 90s, mid upper 90s again today. It plummeted a little bit when we had that storm come in. You showed the water vapor loop earlier.
Yeah.
There were these little, a couple little isolated storms popping up across the region, and we had one of those come through Norman. Joseph, were you in the Weather Center when that hit? I was so surprised. There's water falling from the sky.
Seriously, I was leaving and I was like, "Excuse me, this is rain."
Yeah,
the concept around here.
Too. Yeah, it's very sorely needed. It's been a long time since we got rain in Norman, and we're starting to dry out. And immediately the dew point shot up to 75, which is extremely uncomfortable. 90 over 75. I walked outside and went, oh.
Yeah.
But Kim, I've got a question for you, Kim, real quick, though. Last week, I mentioned we had our 101 here today. Do you know that last week, and I know that y'all were much cooler following that cold front last week, out at Austin Bergstrom International Airport here in Austin last week, down to 58 degrees. That was the coolest ever in July in Austin back at the period of record went back to the Bergstrom Air Force Base back to 1942 last week. And then we're back above 100 again this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the same record broken at Oklahoma City Airport, same low temperature record. It's incredible. It's just one extreme to another. That felt wonderful though.
Well, you know, if you look, and I encourage everyone to do this, go back on the WPC site And I want everybody to look at the surface cold, the national map, and see how far that cold front moved. It moved completely into the Gulf. It was completely south of Brownsville and also south of the Texas Big Bend. It cleared the South Central United States completely. And I talked to Dr. Nielsen Gammon over at A&M last week and mentioned to him, and we're gonna look at some cold front climatology for the summer on that, because I believe that may be one of the strongest cold fronts to ever cross, at least in modern, how we've kept maps and things like that. So,
well, Troy, how deep was that cold front though? About 5 feet?
What's that? Well, it did, when it got down to 58 degrees though, John, believe me, at 5 feet, I'll take it. I'll get down on the ground. I'll squat.
I was getting ready to say I live below 6 feet, so as long as it's at least 6 feet, we're good to go.
There you go.
I'll agree, though, Troy. Normally fronts run out of gas around Interstate 40 this time of the year. On occasion, they'll make it down to Interstate 20. On rare occasion, down to Interstate 10. But in the Gulf, come on, man.
Come on. Yeah.
What is a legit cold front?
Wow.
And, we had record lows here, too. We had 50s. In fact, we had one spot that was 5 degrees away from being in the 40s up in North Alabama last week. So very, very refreshing indeed. Tropical weather, got a couple of waves, one that looks like it's coming off the coast of Africa, one that's in the Eastern Caribbean. They'll be struggling in the short term. Gulf is quiet. So
well, there's still in there, James, quite a bit of dust still in the Western Gulf. And also in parts of the Caribbean. I believe there's still some dust that they're still tracking. And of course, that's going to tend to deter things for at least the time being, right?
Yeah, and the MDR, I think, in addition to the dust, you've got subsidence across a large part of that region out there. So, but understand, this is still July. We've got August and September to go. So we've got a long way to go here. Aubrey, you got a second? Is she gone? I think she's gone.
Poof.
She took the loot and scoot. All right, let's do picks of the week. We will do a long email segment next week, I promise. So let's start with Nate. And I don't think anybody's picked the one you're thinking of, and that is a great pick. I wish I would have.
Friend of the show, Michael Binsky, his magnum opus to date, Vorticity 2, a time lapse of all of the different storm chase videos, stuff from the desert Southwest. Is available in 4K, and holy cow, does it look good in 4K? So do your AirPlay or your share to the TV or whatever, and show it on the biggest screen in the house. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is a total time suck, but it's worth it. And it took him a long time to do this. This is not easy to do, and it's all his work. So it's just awesome. But again, all these links will be on weatherbrains.com. Dr. John, what you got for us this week?
I have a pick that may seem to be a bit odd, but coming from me, maybe not. But this is a site that I've actually stumbled upon, and I use quite a bit now. It provides sunrise and sunset as a calculator, and you can actually follow the position of the sun and the moon by seconds. And if you're doing any kind of forensic work like I do, where you're trying to find the position of the sun or even the moon at any time of the day or night, this is a great site.
Awesome. Yeah, and I was looking at your link. That looks like a fascinating site, which I have not seen. And again, this will be on weatherbrains.com. All right, Kim, what you got for us this week?
I've been trying to find the link. I will find it so we can get it online. But I'm picking a live version of the fee, the little probability plumes that Joseph mentioned. There's we automate some of the severe ones, and so that's something that's available for people to take a look at now, and I will put that up online.
Awesome, good deal. All right, let's see, Troy, what you got?
Hit it, James.
Oh,
Hit it. There you go. So proud.
There you go. And mine is the tropical tidbit satellite page. 'Tis the season for a tropical activity. So I think we can actually wrap this thing here. We've been on the air probably a little longer than usual, but for some
of us, wait a minute, we've got picks from Violetta and Joseph.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize I didn't cancel it out, so I'm back.
I thought she hung up on us.
I thought so too. I actually do have a pick. So I partnered with one of our NBC meteorologists, one of my fellow colleagues, Brittany Shipp, and I translated her children's book into Spanish. So I have a bilingual children's book called The Meteorologist and Me. Yeah, it's a really awesome story. We're focusing on diversity. The main character, her name is Summer. She's African American, and the big thing is to follow your dreams and work hard. And it's a really, really awesome story. It's available in both English, Spanish, and actually also the bilingual version, which includes both texts. It was a really awesome project, and you can get that at thepoweroflovebooks.com.
Remind me next time I'm up there to make sure to get a copy so I can get you guys.
Yeah. It's a really
20.
All right, Joseph, you got a pick for us this week? Lay it on us.
Oh, well, honestly, my pick, I'm just going to be the annoying person and make the flyer to submit your abstracts to that AMS
Fair game.
Yes,
Hey, that's better than half the picks I've put forward on this show in the last 5 years. Go for it. Although tonight's is killer.
All right. And again, Bill Murray, oddly enough, he's working for me tonight. He's doing weather on about 500 radio stations. So he had to bail out and go do some radio work. So we are going to wrap up this week's show. And we want to thank everybody for being so patient with us. Again, we think we have found us a new video platform. But anyway, here's the deal. We're typically on the air every Monday night at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. A lot of people watch it at live.bigbrainsmedia.com. If you would like to get in touch with us, and I promise we'll do a double email segment next week or a triple. The email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. The show notes, our social media accounts are on the website as well, weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
That was great.
Have fun in Boston.
Figure out how to turn this thing off now. Yeah.
Don't pull a me. Don't pull a me.